Hey everybody, my name is Dave Stieber. I am a high school social studies teacher and poetry teacher. I teach at Kenwood Academy. I teach freshman human geography and then a poetry class for primarily juniors and seniors. I think without a doubt, the most fulfilling thing has been having the survivors come and speak to my students. The curriculum is phenomenal in itself, but over the years, I found that anytime that you're able to have a guest speaker come in to speak about anything, it's always truly amazing, and the students really love it. But the survivors that when they come to speak about their experiences, that happened during everything that happened to them and then their fight for reparations and all the things that come with that. The survivors, like the reflections for the students is the survivors was the best thing that they experienced all year, because it makes the curriculum obviously come to life. But then they're able to like just sit and like hear and reflect and just think about and ask questions to the person that experienced all those things, and like get answers and just sit with all the emotions that come with everything that they've learned and heard from the person in that space as well. The thing that really kind of makes it engaging is that the students, they learn the curriculum and they learn about this terrible history, and then they learn about the survivor that's going to come to the classroom. And I've had multiple survivors in different schools and years that I've taught this. But like to actually just like sit and kind of learn about that person and then connect like specific things about that person, the survivor, and then also connect the whole curriculum in all the experiences combined, and then have that person come and speak and share, and talk about all that and answer questions like, well, how are you not angry all the time, and how do you why do you want to talk to us about this, and how can you share all this with us, and how can you do this without crying, and just all those questions that students want to ask. And the survivors, every survivor I've ever had come to class, like wants to answer the questions and is like encourages the students to not be afraid to ask any questions, and all of that. And it's just extremely incredibly powerful. And like literally every year, my students always want the survivors to come back. And like for the past like 4 years, like the survivor will come, we plan one day, and then it'll just always be another time that they'll come back to either answer more questions or just kind of hang out. One time a survivor came and spoke, my students wrote thank you letters, and then the survivor just wanted to come back to collect the letters in person and hang out and spend time with the class too. So it's just every year is it's phenomenal. And it's just like I feel as an educator, I feel fortunate to be in that space, and like I know my students love the experience as well. Couple things, like one, is as a social studies teacher, over the years I've learned that it's very important to teach the real history of different events, and also learn how to teach difficult topics, but also give my students like a space in that and talk about systemic racism and inequality and injustice. And like as a white teacher, like center my like not have it be about me, but also realize that like people who look like me are responsible for a lot of that, and be able to talk like about those things with students as well, and just kind of give them a chance to question and think about things. So that also like the first year that CPS rolled out the curriculum was one of the best CPS PDs I've ever been to, and they did a great job of intentionally planning professional development throughout various parts of the city. And that PD that I went to was really great. And then I was also fortunate enough to be a part of a team of educators put out through with the CTU, and Jen Johnson at CTU, and we all kind of sat and collaborated around the curriculum in ways um, to lead into the curriculum, like other ways to go into it and other ways to end after it. And so we create a lot of professional development in that. So I got to sit with other educators who are really thinking about this curriculum and create our own PDs. And so that, and then also hear from lots of different survivors through different spaces. And Chicago Torture Justice Center was obviously a huge part in making space for the survivors to speak. if you're not in Chicago, that, this history of policing and abuse and, like it isn't a Chicago phenomenon, unfortunately. Stop and frisk happened countrywide, and the three strikes rule happened nationwide, and there's unfortunately like so many instances of police brutality and discrimination. I mean, the Black Panthers were founded because of police brutality, right? So like, since the 60s, since before that, this whole idea isn't new, right? And so while Reparations Won, and John Burge and the things he did are obviously Chicago specific, you could unfortunately find situations like this, maybe not on as large of a scale, or maybe they are and just not uncovered yet. But these ideas of inequality and following orders and dehumanizing people, these you can teach these if you're teaching any unit in history, really. And so you could do a case study on this, if you're not in Chicago and you want to bring this in, or you could do the whole unit and tie other things into it as well. And so I think like the pain of this unit is is profound and extremely traumatic and messed up that these things happened, but also like the wins, right? It's historic, right? And so like I think as an organizing tool of what you can do if you have enough people involved and you're willing to put in the time and the years, and obviously there's still survivors in jail, but or prison, but like that fight is still ongoing, right? And there's been some huge wins, and there's still things that need to be improved. The first year that I taught it, I remember like leading into the curriculum, and before we actually taught the curriculum, we just kind of sat as a class in like a big circle. And I said a few questions that were up there, and kids could kind of answer whatever one they felt comfortable with. But one of the options that kids could talk about was just, have you ever experienced, injustice with the police, or, incidents where you felt like you were targeted by the police? And, like I've been teaching a while at that point, so I'd heard stories from my students, and seen things with my students, and police. But that space, them sitting in a circle and just kids being able to share and just talk about different things they've experienced and harassment they've experienced. Some kids didn't ever experience anything, thankfully, but just that dynamic of being able to share out those conversations was huge. And so then when you teach the curriculum about all these things that happen, right, for some kids it's going to be like like give some validity, I guess, that in a way that these things have happened to them, and unfortunately they've been happening for a long time, which is super unfortunate, but also makes those kids not feel alone in that same space. Also, for other students, it's going to make them realize that, like, when someone's talking about police brutality now, that these things have been going on, and it's not some new phenomenon. And then you can tie in a lot of other history to it, like the Black Panthers and like other organizations have been fighting for this for a long time too. And so just having the historical context, I think, is depressing, but also like super validating in a way, as well, to just realize that the struggle's going on, and there's organizations and there's lots of people working on this thing, and it is possible to get to win in this way as well. And it's unfortunate, it's not easy, but also it shows like that the struggle isn't easy, and it's not like like oftentimes the civil rights movement would be like, oh, everything ended great in 1969, or when the 60s ended, and it's like, no, definitely didn't, right? And with this, like, you can see the trajectory and the timeline and just all the steps that it took. And so I think it's just it's a historical model that like you can actually see the struggle, right? You can see the start and the middle, the end, and all of that. I think it's an organizing tool just to kind of see like what it actually takes to do, to make big changes and to get reparations in this case. And so I think there's just a lot that can come with this.